everyone, welcome back. I'm Rico and this is Relatively Sound, the channel that is caught in the echo. Today we're going to be discussing and reviewing the latest Foo Fighters album titled Your Favorite Toy, which was released this last Friday. Now, if you don't know who the Foo Fighters are at this point, then you've probably been living under a rock. I'm not going to go through the band's entire history, but I do think it is important to know what they've been up to the last couple of years to kind of understand and get a sense from where this album is coming from. Your Favorite Toy is the band's 12th studio album, and it comes after their 2020 release of But Here We Are, which was the first Foo Fighters album after the unfortunate passing of drummer Taylor Hawkins. And that was an album that a lot of people really enjoyed despite the circumstances, because up to this date, it was the band's heaviest album, most raw, most passionate album. Not only was Dave Grohl going through the passing of one of his best friends and bandmates, Taylor Hawkins, but he was also going through the passing of his mom. So as you were to expect, a lot of the lyrics hit very deep or very emotional. And I frankly really enjoy the album, much more than the two previous releases, Medicine at Midnight and Concrete and Gold. In fact, it was around the release of Concrete and Gold where I was kind of starting to fall off the train of the Foo Fighters. But when it came to But Here We Are, I thought musically, not only did this feel like a fresh new start for the band, but just like the tone of it seemed very different. Yeah, there were still some songs that sounded like strictly Foo Fighters, like Under You, Rescued. But there were some moments on the album, like The Teacher, where it goes very kind of experimental. You have production choices like Hearing Voices, where near the end of the song, all the instruments kind of fade out and you get just kind of this demo-like sound with Dave's vocals and the piano and guitar. And then you had collaborations like with the song Show Me How with Dave's daughter doing vocals. And I really loved all those different directions that the band took on But Here We Are. So overall, I thought this was like their best album since Wasting Light. Completely different sound and feel than Wasting Light, but understandably. So when they released But Here We Are, of course, Dave did all the drumming on the album. So when it came to touring that album, they picked up Josh Freese on drums, who has been in a lot of different bands when it comes to live performances. Most notably at the time, he was touring with Nine Inch Nails. And he seemed like a great fit for the band. The tour seemed very successful. And, you know, it was a shocker when, after the tour, when the band was gearing up to release new music, that they announced that they were letting go of Josh Freese. And based off his Instagram post, he was also surprised. If you think about it, though, a little harder, coming from Dave, this actually doesn't seem super surprising, especially when it comes to previous drummers in the band's history. But it also it still seemed kind of weird. And no one knew, like, well, okay, this must mean that new music is coming down the road, surely, right? Which there was. The band did release a song last year called Today's Song, which, if I'm being completely honest, was one of the most forgettable songs the band has ever released. It wasn't bad. It was just, like, so boring, so forgettable. And I was like, if this is what the new album is going to sound like, it's going to be a hard pass for me. It's going to be like Concrete and Gold, but even worse, because at least Concrete and Gold, they just went with some styles that I didn't necessarily really enjoy. I felt like they were trying to like go back to Wasting Light with the lead single Run, which I still think is one of the most underwhelming songs they've released as a lead single. And then, of course, there was some other things that happened outside of the band. One being Dave announcing that he was having a baby outside of his marriage, which just kind of was surprising and, you know, made some fans disappointed. And then there was, for a while, no drummer announced. So it was like, who's going to even be drumming on this album? Is it going to be Dave? But even if it is going to be Dave, who's going to be doing the tour? So eventually it was announced that they were going to get a new drummer. That ended up being Ilan Rubin, who, funnily enough, ended up swapping places with Josh Freese because Rubin at the time was basically a Nine Inch Nails drummer. But he also, again, toured with a lot of different bands. Later on in the year, after Today's Song was released, they released a brand new single called Asking for a Friend, which was the first song featuring Ilan Rubin on drums. So everyone was like a little surprised, like, oh, he's going to be on the new album. It's not just going to be Dave drumming. I listened to the song a couple times when it came out, and I was a little, I don't know, underwhelmed. I was whelmed. I just thought, like, I'm like, okay, this is like kind of a slower song, but not quite a ballad because it does get pretty heavy. It was a pretty kind of like serious song, I guess, for the Foo Fighters, and seemed maybe a little bit more dramatic. And then finding out later on that this was the album's closer, it was even more surprising that this was the lead single. Because again, no one at the time knew, like, is this song going to be off the new album? Is this like a teaser track? Is this being, released with the album that's going to be coming around the corner? And surprisingly enough, the album didn't actually drop until this year. But with Asking for a Friend, I was like, okay, maybe this wasn't the best choice for a lead single, but like, I don't dislike it. I'm like, I like the production a little bit more than for sure the last several albums. But here we are, Concrete and Gold, Medicine to Midnight. Those albums were produced by Greg Kurstin. He's been doing the album since Sonic Highways. And this new album was produced by longtime engineer Oliver Roman. It was also co-produced by the band. And I will get into the production in a minute. But I was like kind of preparing myself for a Foo Fighters album that was going to be not as enjoyable to me as But Here We Are, but was going to be hopefully along the lines of Medicine at Midnight, which not near the top of my favorite Foo Fighters album, but I did enjoy more than Concrete and Gold, which I consider to be at the very bottom, my least favorite album from the band. So they released a couple more songs. I kind of really didn't give them too many listens because with the album, being released around the corner, I just figured, hey, I'll wait till everything's dropped and then really give it my attention. And this to me is like the most Foo Fighters album of all time. And when I say that, I mean this album is just kind of like what you're expecting from the band nowadays. And I will say this, when I was younger and I got into the band, I think I was more of a like bigger fan because I like really enjoyed every album up to Wasting Light. But when I was still getting into music, there was just a lot of other bands that I was getting into that I felt maybe were a little bit more impressive than the Foo Fighters. So like, I always really enjoyed them, but they were never like near the top of my favorite bands of all time. And then, like I said, Wasting Light came out and I thought, oh, this is fantastic. Like, this is one of the band's best albums. And then like Sonic Highways came out and I tried to follow along with like the HBO series. I just thought the execution was maybe not as strong as he was hoping it would be. But again, I think I like that album a little bit more than most people. But then Concrete and Gold came out. I really disliked Run. I really disliked the other songs on the album. And then, like I said, Medicine at Midnight, I felt like kind of swayed me a little bit more into going, okay, the band can still write decent songs. So going into this album, my expectations were kind of all over the place. And on a first listen, I just thought, this is like Medicine at Midnight. Some songs I like, some other songs I don't like, various reasons why I dislike and like the songs. And after like a couple more listens, I thought, no, I like this more than I thought. Like, I actually think this is stronger than Medicine at Midnight. But then after like my fifth or sixth listen, I'm like, no, I think I'm almost trying to make myself believe that it's better than it is, because there's potential, there's opportunities on this album that I do think there's areas within the songs where the band could have taken more aggressive approaches and made them, more memorable, made them more impactful, more powerful. But there's a lot of areas that do kind of meander a little bit too much for me. First thing I want to say is that instrumentation-wise, I think the album is really solid. I think Ian, as their drummer, he fits. I mean, I thought Josh fit like a glove too, but so does Ian. So like the drumming is great throughout the whole album. The rest of the band sounds fine. My issues with later Foo Fighter albums is just how they utilize the band members. I mean, you have 3 guitarists in the band. I really don't think you need 3 guitarists in the band. You have Dave just, I feel like not giving it his all some of the time. Like, vocally, yeah, but like, I feel like he sings a lot of the same melodies. When he does do his screaming, sometimes it works, like on some songs on Wasting Light, but then other times, like even like a song like White Limo, I don't really love all the screaming. Nate is really just, you can never hear him on the song. Some of that is production. I think some of that is also just their decision to like where he is mixed on the songs. Like the volume, I could just never hear the bass enough. And to be fair, is he playing the most like mind-blowing bass lines? No, and I think it's just because the songs that Dave writes doesn't lend itself to that. But again, it's just like, I feel like on the songs, the drums really stand out, but like the guitars, I feel like there's 3 guitars, and half the time I feel like they're just playing like the same kind of chunky chords and just kind of following along with like the melodies of the lead vocals. And then production, as I was mentioning earlier, this time done by engineer Oliver Roman. It's, to me, just as compressed as all the albums that former producer Greg Kurstin did. Like, just, again, bass is mixed to almost where it's non-existent. The drums always sound great, but the guitars just kind of blend into one another too much. And my least favorite thing about this album, by far, besides the overcompression, which is the norm now for Foo Fighter albums, unfortunately, my least favorite thing is Dave's vocals, in the sense that there's like 3 or 4 songs on this album where his voice is put through some distortion effects. And as I've said maybe before on this channel, one of my least favorite things when it comes to a song production is when a lead singer masks their voice behind some type of vocal effect. There's moments on the opening track, Caught in the Echo, that Dave's got that gritty vocal effect. And it maybe works on there because there's a lot of other moments in the song where the vocal effect is stripped away. But on Your Favorite Toy, the whole time his vocal effects just kind of annoys me. And then right after, on the song If You Only Knew, for most of the song, you also have that vocal effect. And then right after that, you get Spit Shine, which is by far my least favorite song on the album. Not just because of the vocals, but for a major part, it's because of the vocals. And I just like, I dislike it. So if there's one thing that I think Greg did better, was that he wasn't putting these vocal effects on Dave's voice. I don't know, maybe it was Dave's decision, but it's just kind of a pet peeve of mine. And then we get to the actual songs, and it's a short album. It's only 10 songs, which is already on the shorter side. It's the fact it's their shortest album, I believe, by 9 seconds, barely beating out Medicine at Midnight. So you think this album would be kind of lean. It still leaves me like wanting more, but like it also still leaves me just kind of disappointed at times. I feel like even on my favorite songs on the album, I still have nitpicky things to say. I think my favorite right now, and probably what'll end up being my favorite on the album, is the second track, Of All People. To me, it kind of has that vibe of The Feast and the Famine, which was my favorite song on Sonic Highways. Both songs are the second songs on the album. They're kind of like more punch you in the face. They have that kind of Wasting Light feel, but maybe a little bit more polished, which I enjoy. Like, it doesn't just sound like they did a couple takes in the garage. Like, it does sound like they kind of took time to like write parts. But I liked the song, and I liked it a lot because, I thought the vocals were catchy. I liked kind of the stop and go a little bit of like the drums and the verses, like the guitars, like they were syncopated in like this rhythm that I just found to be like catchy. But I really liked the song lyrically when I first heard it, because it seemed like a very different song for Dave. It sounded very spiteful. It sounded kind of angry, kind of mean. He's singing like the main lyric is like, of all people you survived when no one else could stay alive. And I'm like, oh, like this almost sounds like something that Eddie Vedder wrote on the Pearl Jam's last album, on Setting Sun, where he's singing about like, am I the only one left hanging on? And it makes you think, oh, both of these guys are getting older, and they're musicians that became famous around a time where it was everyone kind of became friends with one another. And then over the years, unfortunately, a lot of their peers passed away for various reasons. And I kind of thought Dave had this like survivor's guilt that he was putting into a song. And like, even though there is a bit of that in the song, he did come out in interviews saying that the song was actually kind of inspired from him meeting someone that he remembered in his past, like a drug dealer, and that he was shocked that like this guy was still alive when, he originally met him back in the 90s, and that he was shocked that like they were alive and healthy today when a lot of other people in that same scene ended up, passing away, from these drug addictions. And even though I think it's a really interesting lyric, it actually is almost more messed up than what I originally thought the lyrics were about. So it is more interesting than your typical Dave Grohl song when it comes to the lyrics, but I almost kind of liked my vision of what I thought the song was before Dave told this background in an interview. Another song that I did like quite a bit from the get-go was Window. I really like this song from that very first guitar riff. It has this kind of swanky, this kind of like, swagger to it that reminded me of like a Toady song. It just has that, it's like a playful riff, but it's like a little dirty. It's a little like not taking itself seriously. But it's still pretty rocking, but kind of in a more laid back feel. So it gave me Toadie's vibes. Even the chorus did, but the chorus, again, there was something in the song that just kind of let me down a little bit, and it was the chorus. It just kind of didn't go where I wanted it to. Like it instead of like becoming more and more energetic, it kind of just like, the guitar strum, the drums kind of drop out, and the rest of the band drops out. And I was just like, no, I wanted it to like pick up, not like slow down. So again, I really like the riff, but the composition wasn't what I was hoping it to be. Dave's lyrics on this one, unfortunately, a lot of recent Dave Grohl lyrics besides But Here We Are just kind of seems generic. And then one of my other favorites ended up actually being the album's first song and one of the more recent singles, Caught in the Echo. This song, on a first listen, I kind of thought just another generic Foo Fighters song. Good, not great.
Good, not great.
As I listened to it more and more, the more I realized I actually really enjoy this song because, yes, it starts off with that like kind of heavy, in-your-face, abrasive guitar riff. And then those, Dave screaming vocals with the, distorted effect. I'm like, I don't like this. And then the verse to me was just kind of like, it is what it is. Like, it just didn't do much for me. But then you get the chorus, which the more I listen to it, the more I'm like, I really like this chorus because it goes from a kind of more like, not punk, but definitely a more just kind of aggressive sound to more melodic. And I feel like, unfortunately, some of the other songs on this album do that, and it gets to a point where it's almost a little too much. It almost has a "There's Nothing Left to Lose" feel in the little guitar riff in that chorus, in the bass line, which you actually can hear a little bit of, Dave's vocal melody, which again is sandwiched in between him shouting, "Do I, do I, do I?" And again, like those moments make me not love the song. But the rest of the chorus, I love the song. Now, unfortunately, the rest of the songs, I'm just kind of torn on. I mean, there's definitely a couple that I just don't really care for. Like I said earlier, my least favorite, Spit Shine. It's the White Limo of the album. White Limo is by far my least favorite on Wasting Light. This is just, to me, a worse version of it. If You Only Knew, again, has like a somewhat decent chorus. I like the chords in the chorus. Again, they're more melodic than the verse. The verse kind of sounds like a more modern Queens of the Stone Age vibe with Dave's vocal melody and just the arrangement of the instruments, but just not as like powerful, or just not as like cool sounding as a Queens of the Stone Age song. And then I feel like on this song, they did that Hearing Voices thing where you get like the bridge or the post chorus where you get more of the acoustic guitars. And especially with the outro, it does the same thing. It goes back to that section with acoustic guitars and it's more tender. And if they hadn't done it on Hearing Voices, I would have been more impressed with it on this song, but it is what it is. The title track, Your Favorite Toy, does not do a lot for me, unfortunately. It has like over the repeated listens kind of fallen off for me just because, like, again, I don't mind the song's energy. Like, I think that's the best part of the song. Sounds like that Minutes into Midnight where they were like trying to be a little bit more fun. And I don't know, like I kind of like the phrase your favorite toy, but then when you read the lyrics, it just sounds so like nothing. Like, what is he singing about? Like, it doesn't sound like there's any narrative to the song. It's just like a phrase that are put with other non sequiturs. And again, the vocal effects kill a lot of the song. And then we just have some songs that I think just either sound like other Foo Fighters songs done slightly worse, or there's just choices in them that like don't really pay off. Unconditional, which I know was debuted live with Josh on that But Here We Are tour, it sounds like Outside, the song from Sonic Highways. Again, it sounds a little kind of compressed with the production. The lyrics, again, it sounds like a less impressive version of But Here We Are. And overall, it's just, it has a good drive to it, but it just sounds like Outside. And there's other moments on the album where I thought sound like other Foo Fighters song. I mean, even on Caught in the Echo, at the end where he's yelling the do I part, it sounds like the melody in the section of Erase, Replace. I think it's actually where he's just yelling the replace. Like, there's just moments on some of these songs where it sounds like they're just repeating themselves. But at least with those previous sounds, like, again, it kind of sounds recycled, but they're not, Unconditional sounding like Outside. At least Outside's a song I like. Child Actor, when the song starts, I thought, oh, this is going to be one I like. It's a little slower, but it's like a little bit more melodic. I like that it sounds more vulnerable, especially the lyrics. He's singing about I think it's more kind of like a metaphor for being a child actor. And, it sounds actually like very kind of raw and emotional, something like But Here We Are, but he's, using a different approach. He's not singing about himself. But then you get to the chorus where it's just Dave yelling, turn the cameras off. And if Tony was here, this is where he would say, this is a chorus ad nauseum, because literally it's the only thing sung in the chorus, and the chorus happens like 20 times by the time the song ends. And again, I like the chords and I like the melody, but it just goes nowhere. It's just him repeating this line over and over to the point where it's like, okay, it was a good line the first time you sung it, but it just got to the point where it made the song for me one of my least favorites. Even though going into the song, I actually thought this might be one of my favorites. I like Asking for a Friend as the album closer. Again, I don't think it's a good, it was not a great first single for the album, but it makes sense now that you listen to it. The instrumentation is really strong. It's actually some of the best production on the album. Do like that it does get a little rock, it gets a little heavy, but it doesn't go all the way, and I like that because then I think it'd be a little too jarring. Drumming is great on the song, and it's a good closer, especially when the previous two tracks are ones that I think, like Child Actors, could have been a great song, but it wasn't. And then Amen, Caveman, a silly song title, kind of funny, but a forgettable song. It does the same kind of disco drum beat as Your Favorite Toy, but it's even more forgettable. And to wrap it up, I think this album, it's so weird because I think it's kind of like Medicine at Midnight Part 2, where both those albums have moments that I think are great. There's songs that I really dig. There's some production choices I like. There's some songwriting I like. And there's glimpses of like classic Foo Fighters sprinkled within. There's a lot of things lacking in this album. There's just a lot of things on this album that I feel like had they done it slightly differently, this could have been, it was never going to be as good as But Here We Are for me at least, and I think for a lot of fans, but it could have been like slightly like the next Wasting Light. Overall, I think this is actually just, I think this is kind of how the Foo Fighters are going to be for the rest of their career. They're going to put out albums and songs that have tiny moments that sound classic, that sound just like great rock music that I want to listen to. And then there's just moments that are going to be like leaving us with our, us scratching our heads going, why did they choose to do this? Or, why couldn't have this been maybe fleshed out a little bit more? So if you're going to listen to the album, the songs that I would recommend, my favorites, would be Caught in the Echo, Of All People, Window, and I'll say Asking for a Friend. This one's a hard album to rate because it is kind of down the middle for me, but I think it's better than mid. Nowhere near But Here We Are. So I don't know, if I give Medicine at Midnight like a 6.5, 7, 6, 7, I'd give this one probably just a solid 6. Better than middle, but definitely underwhelming. I will say though, I went in expectations kind of lower, so I'm actually not disappointed, but I was hoping I'd be proved wrong with this album, but I was not. But drop us a comment. Let us know what you think of this album. If you're a hardcore Foo Fighters fan, tell me why you think this is a great album. If you feel like me, also drop us a comment and let us know. What are your favorite songs, least favorite songs, and, how would you rate this album? We appreciate you watching, and we'll see you later. But until next time, we hope you take care. Bye-bye.